Did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
Hey everybody, welcome back to House of Asher. I am your host, Steve Asher. And before we get really into the show, two things. We had recently lost a big fan of the show and a big supporter of the show, Marty Cook. He's an educator and a mentor to many generations of students, and pretty funny guy. Looked a lot like Colonel Sanders. He had the beard and stuff. And a lot of times he would dress up. He would go cosplay at events as Colonel Sanders, and man, he pulled it off. It was just a really good-hearted person, and missed the heck out of him. And I should also say today is the day of the King of Hell, Glenn Danzig. Some of you guys may know of his music, and if not, you need to. But I need to make sure to thank everybody for listening on Spreaker and Spotify and iHeart and iTunes, and also globally on Paranormal UK Radio. Thank you guys. Cheers. And what we're going to get into today, well, we're going to get into some kind of different stuff. And we're going to be all over the place. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of start it off with Mr. Stephen Smith. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hello. How is everybody?
Everybody is well. I'm pretty sure everybody is well. And will your Miss Tiffany be joining us today?
I'm right here.
Okay. Small, still voice in the back. That's fine. Yeah. So anyway, we kind of come across each other. I'm not even sure how we come across each other, man. I don't know if you'd heard a show or if we'd through mutual acquaintances. Maybe we were talking sort of about the spirit mechanic stuff, and was that how it was? I slept since then.
Yeah, pretty much. I think we actually got connected through Mr. Robert Riggy.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Man's a sweetheart. He really is.
Well, let me ask you. We had mentioned a few things about sort of your background. Before we get into what you do, let's touch on a little bit about who you are and who you were and how you kind of come to do what you do.
Okay. Well, it's said that the body compensates, for a lack of a specific sensory organ, and mine definitely did. I was actually born blind with congenital cataracts, and through that, I actually wound up with a overdeveloped sense of empathy, as well as the ability to actually see the other side of things. This doesn't necessarily mean that, I grew up as a quote-unquote medium, but it does mean that I can actually see more to the spiritual side than I can the physical. Traces of people's energy that they leave behind, I actually see that. And depending on how many people have been around, it actually illuminates objects. It allows me to find them, regardless of where I'm at. Wound up being trained for energetic alchemy with the Draconic Circle. It's basically a mixture of Draconic Druidism and Knight Templar Masonry alchemy. And things have just kind of progressed from there. Spirit mechanics has always been a dream of mine, since I was old enough to understand what it is to actually be dealing with more of the negative entities and the problems that they can cause. And I got together with my wife, Tiffany, and our friend Brian, and we just decided to do it, just decided to go for it. And because the main goal is to make sure that there is at least a group of individuals that people can go to with these problems. They're not left high and dry. And I think over the years, we've been doing this for what, honey, 6 years?
Close.
Almost 6 years. And I think we've reached several thousand at this point. all together, and that's including several out of state cases, um, expanded into other states as far as team members, and it's just an amazing thing. I wouldn't change things for the world.
Well, it seems like, I go on what I know, and I don't claim to be anything more than just a traveler and a person who kind of studies things and has an interest in esoteric and occult things, and always have. But I grew up as a big comic book reader, so it's sort of like Doctor Strange meets Daredevil with a touch of Black Knight mixed in there somewhere. It's kind of
Actually, it's not wrong. The team actually calls me the metaphysical Daredevil.
well, that's pretty apt. So, when did it start really kicking off? I mean, was this as always how it was, or did it slowly come to a head more as you began to study and open up? I guess you would call it your third eye, and start taking those type of journeys. I mean, did you work with anything like astral travel and things like that?
As far as gifts are concerned, they were pretty strong from the get go. It I started training in my alchemy and things like that around the age of 15, and that kind of sparked different avenues. That's when, as you mentioned, things like astral travel, projection, uh, working into things like Solomonic seal work, and what is considered high magic or ritualistic magic. We're putting the word magic in quotes.
And I'm sure with a K at the end instead of a C.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, magic with the C is what you see on the Vegas Strip. Magic with the K is closer to the legit thing.
Right. Well, it's funny because I think that age that you're talking about, people come to different paths, and depending on what background they had, or whatever emotional or cognitive, you know, um, positives and or negatives that you have. Sometimes you go different ways, and it seems like you kind of took on the kind of mage quality of going out and wanting to do good for people and helping and things like that, which is really great. I know a few different people from, well, man, I know, good Lord, in the probably 110 episodes we've done, we've had practitioners of like English magic, and I've had people that were like queens of vampire courts, in New Orleans, and people that do all kinds of different stuff, to touch on all kinds of different elements of esoteric, and not even so much that it's forbidden, well, maybe slightly forbidden magic and logic by now, but at one time that was a normal mainstay. There was a time when what you do was, not that everyone did it, but that was just like back in the old days when counties had dowsers to help find water.
Right.
And the best ones were albinos. I don't know why. And there you go again. You have certain deficits. You also gain certain pluses. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense what you do. Now, does your wife, is she more chronicling this, or does she have certain attributes and gifts and things like that of her own, or how does that work?
People ask me about this stuff, and I just kind of go blank because I really don't. I really don't like putting a label on things. Um, most of what I do is keeping Steve straight, but I do practice a little bit of root work. Uh, Sometimes they call it Appalachian folk magic. Just kind of depends on where you are and who you're talking to.
Right, granny witches and
Um,
stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Uh, and blend it in a little bit with a little bit of the Celtic lore. But I do a lot of work with herbs, and I do a lot of work with making smoke blends and things of that nature, oils, things that'll help the guys along whenever they're out and about. As far as gifts are concerned, truth be told, I really didn't start practicing until I met Steve.
I'm a bad influence.
No, well, I think sometimes like attracts like, and sometimes you just know when things click properly.
Yeah.
I mean, at least from my end, as I told you guys previously before we did the interview and stuff, that out in the Appalachians is where my mom and her family come from. So she was pretty much born with a green thumb. I mean, she could plant a donut and grow a donut tree. I mean, that's just how she was. And I worked alongside her when I was a little boy, and this is like 70s and stuff, right? I remember my mom would come out with a pot, dump water, flip it upside down, set on the pot, and start weeding. And then here I am going right along and hated it. I wanted no part of it. I wanted to go play Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or something, But I'm glad she did because it really grounded me. And now that I'm older, it sort of became my thing. I'm the, like my wife, God bless her, she will drown plants. She'll kill plants. And so I'm kind of the one that's got the green thumb, and so I'm the one that's always got mint in the windows and basil growing out here, and I've got different little flowers. Usually, a lot of times, you know how they work, and it's like, well, this is good for depression, or this is good to counter certain insects in your garden, and all that. I don't do a whole lot. I don't grow mandrake and hemlock and all that kind of shit. There's so many animals and kids running around, but yeah, I mean, it's really important because it seems like you guys are keeping a tradition that 100 years ago, maybe sooner than that, like set up in certain isolated areas like the Appalachians, poultices and all that stuff, and potions and all these different tinctures and things. That was normal. It's just I think people have lost their connection. What do you kind of feel about that?
Well, apothecary, either in alchemy or in green witchery or even just straight up medicine, I believe it's actually starting to make a comeback, and it really kind of needs to. Now, I do 100% believe that there should be a blending of medical science and apothecary. I don't think that one can work without the other properly. But as far as supplementing things and making sure that the home is safe, that your body works properly, things like that, apothecary is actually really great.
Well, you have the old belief, I mean, so you look at the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and later on other civilizations, there was like the mind, the body, and the soul. It was a threefold thing.
Yep.
And if you don't keep, any of those in check, it's going to affect the other ones. And, it seems, I don't know, it seems like when like New Age stuff come out, which the New Age thing was a positive and a negative. I think a lot of people ran with it, got a book off this, that, maybe they had a Tumblr account or something, and then boom, they know it all. And
right.
Sometimes that can go really badly if you're not really grounded. It's just like you wouldn't give a kid a chainsaw or, just let him run down the street. There has to be a lot of humility and a lot of stillness and a lot of, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. Just natural, let things happen, like you were like your wife had said. And when you put labels on stuff, you have to kind of let things happen organically.
Right. We've got a saying in the group, expectations breed limitations. When you actually place a label, you're expecting things to only move in that direction. You're not allowing them to actually flow the way they need to. And, that's kind of the approach that we like to take to things, is to be more, what a lot of people say nowadays, organic with things, more true to ourselves. We go into cases and people come to me and, you wouldn't see the Methodist minister, you wouldn't see the The Alchemist, you see a dumpy, fat redneck guy with a huge beard. And that's the way I treat clients. I am a dumpy, fat redneck guy with a huge beard. Um, we don't want to be, staunch and pop collar and know it alls and, that kind of thing. We want people to come and feel safe, like they're with family. Um, and we've had more success helping others that way than uh, most of the time of because they'll come in and, well, this preacher said this, or this priestess said that, or this person said this, and they really didn't help me. They said it was all my fault, and I'm sitting here going, well, let's look at things a different way. And I just want the ability to have other people feel safe, not like they're coming and well, this guy is going to wave his hands and it's going to be a magic bullet that fixes it, or well, this guy is going to show up and he's going to tell me all this kind of stuff, hit me in the face with a flaming Bible, and tell me I'm a sinner. And it's like, why? I think a lot of people, like you were saying, get lost in the ego side of things. They focus too much on what they, quote unquote, they can do, when in fact, it's not them in the first place.
Well, and it's true of a lot of different faiths. It's not just necessarily in spiritualist camps and whatnot. And well, if I can tell you a story real quick, there was a rabbi that was supposed to come to a new to the it's not the mosque, the synagogue. Sorry. Anyway, and these people they got everything set out. It's so nice, and they got the finest china and the best wine, and it's a great spread, And anyway, so they're waiting for this guy, very famous gentleman, and a beggar had been sitting outside, and this beggar would kind of come by, and it's like, wow, it looks like you guys are getting ready to do something kind of cool. So, oh, we're getting ready to have our new rabbi here. He's like, oh, that's wonderful. I said, seems like you got a lot of food. Could I maybe, talk you out of a handful of grapes, or maybe a little wine, or even water? And they're like, no, get out of here. They're going to embarrass us in front of this guy. You don't need to be here right now. And he's like, oh, so he come back and he did it a couple of times with a couple of different of the congregation, and each time he ran off, and I think one person started throwing rocks at his feet. Anyway, well, the afternoon passed, and it was probably almost 10 o'clock at night. Everybody's sitting there. They've been there since 11 or 12. They're just wore out and tired, standing around this big banquet table. And in here comes the same guy. And they're like, for the love of God, you probably ran him off. So he walks up, goes around, he takes off his hat, he takes off his dirty clothes. He's got this, very immaculate looking gear on, and it was the rabbi. And everybody's faces just dropped, right? They had this expectation of what they thought this person was, and it was one of those, look, you need to really look past that, and you need to soften your heart, if you're going to have me here as your rabbi. We all have something to learn from each other, and you
Absolutely.
Can't. And I thought that was a really, really good life lesson, and it's very true.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely true. It's very accurate. And I'm a firm believer in what a lot of people refer to as the gray path, which is basically a path, quote unquote, balance. Nothing is 100% white, nothing is 100% black. There's always going to be a touch of gray. And the big thing is that regardless of what practice people actually do practice, it is a necessary thing in order to keep this quote unquote balance to things, you have to have a little darkness. You have to have a little light. And what it really boils down to is how people treat it. This is both coming from outside sources and also from the individual practicing. It's how people treat it. If you have kind of like witchcraft has such a negative connotation, and a lot of it has to do with, um, unfortunately, it has to do with religious groups, bashing it, and then you have, the certain practitioners who are ego driven, and the only focus of their magic is for personal gain, which doesn't do anything but snowball what the religious groups have started to, kind of pander around. And really, all witchcraft is it's setting an intention and letting it go. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with, crazy black cat situations and flying brooms and, burning babies and whatever else that it is that people say. It's literally sitting there in your own space and going, this is what I need. And then releasing it and allowing it to come back to you. That's all a spell is. Um, it just really, it bothers me that, and this is kind of on a tangent, and I'm sorry, but it kind of bothers me that we have religion on one side and spiritualism on the other side, and both of them are looking at each other and going, "You're wrong." When in fact it's literally the same principles, it's the same ideals, it's the same works. What's the difference in someone placing a spell out into the universe? I am sitting here in ritual, lighting my candles, chilling with my stones, and I go, you know what, universe, I need this thing. And going to God in prayer at bended knee at your bedside and going, you know what, God, I could really use this thing. I don't see a difference. I think that what it really boils down to is semantics and people really just unwilling to read between the lines.
Yeah. I mean, again, a lot of my stuff goes back to pop culture. Um, like there was a original Star Wars or Star Trek episode where one people's sides of their face was black, the other sides were white, and they hated each other. They thought everything the other one did was wrong. There's no way they could ever come together. And that's the thing, once you have different ages of enlightenment, pardon me, and you have different times when, you know, the the walls go down a little bit, and then you have people back and forth with each other, and they slowly learn that they're not that different. I mean, it's a trope. It's been something that's been told 1,000 times, but there's truth in that. And like you said, a lot of it's got to do with when people talk to me about God. I said, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Well, which one?" You know, um, and one person's horned God is another person's demon. That's I mean, this. That's the whole reason Lucifer looks like he does in art now, because they borrowed from earlier religions and stuff like that. Phoenician beliefs and Sumerian beliefs and all these different type of pagan deities that were more kind of an amalgamation of humans and animals, because that's all we are really. At least in my mind, we're all just animals. But
Right.
but that's again, some people you can say that to, and they'll go, "Oh, that's interesting." And then some people you see that their eyes glaze and the wall go up, and they're like,
Oh yeah.
"Sinner, outlander," and it's and it gets all children of the corn real quick. But let me ask you this, because like I said, we've been talking a little bit on this and that. You gave some definitions of what you do.
Uh-huh.
Break it down, especially with the people who are not familiar with some of the things that you do. The two, I need to mention being a demonologist and also another thing. Would you kind of walk through those a little bit and explain what those are and what they do?
Oh sure. Basically, what an energetic alchemist is it's someone who facilitates a change. Um, if we're actually helping someone as far as a healing, what we're doing is we're teaching the body how to heal itself. If we are helping out in an emotional situation, as at least as far as energetically, we're working with the chakra system and helping people come to terms with issues. Um, the whole idea, we use the basic fundamental principles of alchemy.
Sorry,
You
and
have
yes, I have dogs.
no, you're fine.
Sorry about that.
But you have the first principle of alchemy, which is literally understand what it is that you're working with. You know, not just, oh well, it's a piece of wood. Well, what actually makes up that piece of wood? Once you figure that out, then you break it down. Okay, these are the separate pieces. Then you reform it into something that is more usable, or is something that is uh, more efficient, more streamlined for the situation. Well, an energetic alchemist takes the person's energy or their aura, depending on, what you subscribe to, and they look at it and they go, well, these pieces fit and these pieces are out of place. They're out of joint. There's holes, there's issues. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with what's there that actually works. And then we're going to have it spread throughout so that everything works correctly. Also, technically, my particular alchemy, the way that I kind of took it after I was trained, was in the direction of spiritual surgery. The joke is I have the steadiest energetic hands in the business, but that's actually how I do exorcisms and especially attachment removals. Is with the ability to see the other side of things, I actually see where they are, how they're affecting the body, how they're affecting the ethereal body. And it allows me to actually treat it as if I were a doctor. Um, I have actually spiritually removed what looked like tumors from people's bodies, um, different things, entities that looked like leeches. Um, I've repaired spiritual bones, different things like that. And the interesting thing is that the method that I use actually yields physical results as well. When I fix the ethereal body, because the physical body reflects the spirit, the physical body begins to heal as well. Um, so, I mean, it's just really interesting the way that worked out. Um, as far as the demonologist, it's part of the Draconic Circle training that I've got. Even though I took it into the realm of spiritual quote unquote medicine, uh, I was actually trained as something more akin to a uh, spiritual police officer or MP. I was sent into situations, and because of my ability to affect energy tangibly, I was trained to reach into someone and actually pull it out. There's no, okay, we're going to talk this out. We're going to have the Linda Blair and pea soup situation. It's a do not pass go, do not collect, $200 or leaving. Now, that only works with attachment removals. Exorcisms are a completely different beast and are handled completely different. Um, and the big difference just between an attachment removal and an exorcism is an exorcism requires faith of some form. Not just in your exorcist, not just in yourself, but you have to rely on a foundation of some form of faith. Because what you're actually doing as an exorcist is you're going to court. There's a contract. Okay, well, it was signed. and they have to give me this because they signed it away. Your job as an exorcist is to be a lawyer for that person. Okay, well, this little clause here says this, and this little loophole here says this, and you have to plead their case. You have to show the demonic that they have no ability, they have no right or power over that person. And you
Okay.
have to appeal to the person themselves in order to make sure that they understand that.
Okay. Let me ask you something real quick. One of the first things that comes to my mind. I actually have three things I want to hit you with, but the first thing is I'm sitting there thinking, okay. Earlier in their conversation, Tiffany had said she had never dealt with this before she come saw you. What in the frick did she? How did what was her reaction the first time she saw an exorcism or any sort of psychic surgery? I'm very curious to hear that.
Well, actually, when we first met, it was kind of funny because he started letting that side of himself show little by little, and I know he was trying to ease me into it, and I've always had an interest in this sort of thing. It was just being raised where and how I was. I had absolutely no idea where to even start, besides just watching what was on TV. And it was really funny because he would let a little piece slip, and then he'd look at me and ask me if I was scared yet. No. And then here we go with something else. Did I scare you away? No. And on and on and on and on and on until finally, I'm sitting in on my first major deal, and it was the funniest thing because all I could think to myself was, okay, here we go. What do you need? I, it's really, I have a lot of respect for the things that we deal in, but I've never really had a lot of fear there, and that's two different things. I have a lot of respect for the entities and the creatures that we deal with, and because there is every possibility that you can get hurt and you can get badly hurt, but I've never really had fear because to me, it just in my mind, if I fear it, then I have lack of faith in myself, my team, my higher power. So I don't fear. It's never scared me.
Well, it seems that you guys come together for a reason. It seemed like that, like you said, you kind of balance him out. I often joke with my wife Cheyenne. She's much more. She was raised. She's from Chicago, like I said, and her family were Mormon, and I was raised more Southern Baptist and holiness and different things and stuff. But it was so funny because, like you said, the the way she come at it is different than the way I come at it. So it gave me maybe a more rounded view of the situation. Because I often say that if I had been given free reign of the house in regards of like decor, it would look like something off Vincent Price movies or Hammer films. That's just my nature. I like kind of spooky, kitschy stuff. That's just my nature. But
Yeah, that would be me.
okay, well, yeah. Halloween isn't one day a year, but at least not for me. But I was going to ask you guys. Now we were talking about repairing things. Now, have you ever dealt with somebody who had say a wound or some sort of not an attachment, but some sort of damage from say a previous life? That was my second question.
Absolutely. It's what you'll actually find in a lot of shamanic circles. It's actually referred to as a pain body. basically what this is it's just as you mentioned, it's a trauma that was never really uh, reconciled. There was no real fix to it in that past life. And the theory is because the soul is an eternal thing, you're just carrying it forward until you can find a resolution. Um, the interesting thing with pain bodies, we've actually done a lot of these recently. Um, it's basically a form of spiritual PTSD. You'll have triggers that you don't understand and phobias that have no real meaning, that have no ground in this life, pains that make no sense, illnesses that make no sense. They can't be explained by psychiatric sciences or medical sciences. Um, and through past life regression, which is actually the safest way of doing it, through past life regression, it's easier to walk the person through it. Um, Using the law of the observer. Basically, they see themselves from the outside. They see the situation from the outside. Oh, this is what happened to me. This is the problem. This is, why I feel this way or why I have these hurts or these ailments. And once they understand that and they accept that as something that they had gone through but aren't going through, a healing process starts that's actually nothing short of miraculous.
Well, let me ask you another thing. As usual, just as we kind of do the show, I make little notes and stuff and little points to hit back. I always hate interrupting the flow of the conversation, but you were talking about people having attachments, and you said, well, there was a contract signed. Have you dealt with generational things like where a father or mother sold or bartered for their child's soul for whatever, be it fame, be it stability, maybe to whatever, maybe they'd lost a sibling or something to try to bring that sibling back or something. Have you dealt with anything that's, think along the lines of like eyes wide shut type generational dark magic users or whatever? I hate to say Satanists because I know people who are Satanists. They don't really necessarily believe in an entity, good, bad, or indifferent, but people that are into demonic worship and dark entity worship.
Yes, I have. Nothing to the extent of, at least in my personal experiences, nothing to the extent of someone selling someone else into bondage, basically. Uh, but I have actually dealt with a lot of generational, quote unquote, cursing. Um, and there are a number of ways that a generational curse can come down. A lot of times it's not necessarily a demonic that causes that. It's actually something closer to what a lot of people would consider fae or fairy folk.
Right.
Because, the whole movement, at least as far as their energetic works, is karmic based. And it goes until the injustice is fixed. And we've actually had a couple of them over the past couple of years that were pretty heinous. A case out in Nebraska, a friend of ours, he one of his big issues at the time was actually something that had happened generations ago. Something that his grandfather, great grandfather had done that seemed meaningless at the time, but actually wound up accruing a great deal of interest. And we wound up having to work with him through that. Now, there are situations that the most heart wrenching cases, at least as far as quote unquote contracts, and that's basically what we call making a deal, is the open ended stuff. So you've got somebody saying things out of frustration or even out of innocence, and things like, "I would give anything for this situation to change. I wish somebody would fix this. I'm calling out to whoever will listen." And the problem with that is because it's open ended, it allows anything and everything to answer that call. And we've seen kids, we've seen full grown adults that have lost 10, 20 years of their memory, all kinds of crazy stuff because they decided just to leave it in fate's hands, if you want to call it that, and just kind of go, well, if you'll fix it, I'll give you whatever you want. That's more of what I've dealt with. I haven't, once again, I haven't personally dealt with anybody basically forfeiting someone else's soul.
Well, it seems that, like like we talked earlier, is that something that was very natural in one culture becomes demonized. Especially under, whatever rule, Christian rule or whoever, and things that were natural in regards of their native homes, fairies, pigs and brownies and all these, gnomes and all that stuff take on a really dark element. But then, and then again, though, certain of those creatures had certain dark aspects to them, and they loved to barter with people, and they loved to trick people. I was going to say real quick, just in between our thing, Stephen Smith, his wife Tiffany, part of Spirits Mechanics, they're talking to us today about all the crazy and interesting stuff that they've been in on. And like I said, you're listening to House of Asher, most likely on Paranormal UK Radio, globally. Cheers, everybody. So, in that vein of dealing with stuff like that, do you feel that, and just like I said before, everything's secular? In the late 1800s, 1900s, guys like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a brilliant writer, but he was also a spiritualist. And it was actually more of the elite that practiced it more than, probably the general public. I mean, Lincoln's wife was a huge spiritualist, and some people even said that their son, that had been around so many different people that were shot and killed, was actually cursed himself. But my question past that is, what do you feel is happening now? Do you feel that there's a kind of a spiritual enlightenment, a resurgence, or do you think maybe just people are maybe slightly better educated, maybe more open? Because, I mean, it depends on where you look at. You see so much death and stuff on television, but then again, maybe that's what all is being reported. Maybe they're not showing the happy, shiny people stuff, because that's not gonna get people to tune in. What's going on?
As far as I'm concerned, where I'm an alchemist, I'm a spiritual scientist, and the whole idea right now is that I don't think that there is a new enlightening going down. I think what's happening is people are becoming more aware as opposed to being so shut off, so closed-minded. Because you see this situation now, it's not just a group of people in an area. This huge spiritual awakening, what it is it's like a domino effect. One person will say something, and then another person, several, homes away will say something, and then another person, a town over, and so on and so forth. But after everything just starts to move, you wind up with an entire area that is just full of quote unquote awakened people. I think that what a lot of people call the fade or the veil or the spiritual partition, the curtain, whatever you want to call it, basically the separation between us and the spirits, I do believe that is actually becoming more and more transparent. It's starting to thin. That's the reason why you're seeing a lot more, at least as far as legitimate paranormal research. You're starting to see more in the realm of vortexes popping up naturally, portals, um, what some call wormholes, tears, different things like that. Um, and a lot of people are very sensitive to this kind of stuff because they were born at a time where the veil is at its thinnest. Um, so it's more of a spiritual maturity thing as opposed to a straight out enlightenment. At least I think so.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, and again, I've been lucky enough to travel through, fair amount of the U.S. and across the globe and Thailand and a lot of the Asian countries and stuff. The thing that I noticed, at least here in the South, and is that because so much of the old ways came and kind of stayed locked in, especially in the mountain world, because there was so little contact, and a lot of the traditions stayed on, and it seems like a lot of people, they have that duality. Oh well, I'm a Catholic. Oh well, I'm a Protestant. Or well, I'm whatever. Or we don't really believe in this stuff. But now my granny did say, if this goes on, you do this. Just like the old thing about, if you have a wart or something, lick it in the morning, and within so many days it'll go away. Weird stuff like that. But I can almost guarantee you could go today and ask somebody about, hey, what was some little old folk remedy your grandma had that for whatever reason you still remember or you still use. And I'm almost sure probably at least 6 out of 7 or 6 to 7 out of 10 will have something, because especially in the South, it is slower. There is a certain cadence and a time to the talk and the movement and the way things change, which isn't always good. But there's also elements that you have a closer descending line to the old ways and to the the folk magic and things like that of our grandparents, great grandparents. So that's what it's so funny, because a lot of people think of like places like Kentucky and Indiana and Missouri, or as we say, Missouri, as as like flyover, and I'm like, you're doing yourself such a disservice. The coasts are cool, that's fine. I couldn't live there, but great place to visit and all that. But there's so much stuff. I guess I would consider down home, might be a little, yokely, but that's okay. Sometimes people's got to put their phones away and try not to be so cool for 5 minutes, and they can have really interesting experiences.
Right. Right.
So so what's the next big thing for you guys? What's something you guys are getting ready to do? Because I know we talked about looking into, different conventions and whatnot and get-togethers and all that. What do you guys have planned next? And how can people get a hold of you too?
At this point, we've got a local mystical fair. We're in Lexington, Kentucky, so we have a local mystical fair that's actually coming up July 13th and 14th. And it's at 1084 Whipple Court in Lexington. It's only $5 a day to get in, but there's all kinds of stuff to see and do. It's family friendly, pet friendly. It's always a fun time. And then we are actually going to start doing some online courses soon for things like grid work, as far as working with crystals and stones, and some apothecary stuff, different types of energetic work and healings and different things like that. And then we also have Scarefest coming up, which is the 12th through the 15th in September. And that one's always a fun bit too. That one will be in Lexington, Kentucky, and
Weekend after that's Pagan Pride.
yeah, Pagan Pride Festival in Lexington as well next weekend, and we stay hopping. Plus, we've got several cases, a couple of out of states, a possible one in Pennsylvania coming up, and we've got two here in Kentucky that we're going to be helping out with over the next couple weeks, and so
Busy's good.
right.
That's awesome. Well, I know if you're ever down toward Louisville or Louisville, however I always say Louisville, um, check out, or what you can do that online as well. There's some friends of mine that have a podcast called Hillbilly Horror Stories. I don't know if you're familiar with those guys, but they do a lot of different hauntings and different type of paranormal stuff, and um, pretty good group of folks, and they definitely probably would like to have you on and stuff. And I know I definitely want to have you guys back on here to touch on some more stuff and learn some more about some of your different adventures and stuff. But like I said, we probably got about 8 minutes or so left in this episode. I'm trying to think now. You were talking about way early in the conversation, talking about your stones and whatnot. Um, there's a time, and I think we're hardwired for magic. Um, quote me on that. That's my quote now. Hardwired for magic. Um, like, okay, there's two or three things, especially little boys, little girls too, probably to a point, but little boys get into when they're small. Dinosaurs, okay, like mystical creatures, different type of entities, Bigfoot, whatever, and rock collecting. That was one of the big things I always got into,
Yep.
and things like spar and things like that. Multicolored type stone and floral spar and all that stuff. We live on a big karst system, which is a lot of aquifers running underground and all that here in Western Kentucky, and so sometimes you would find kind of cool looking stones, and I always gathered them, and I always wanted to kind of put them in little circles in my room and put them in little places, not like an OCD thing. It looks cool, and for some reason I always felt better when I hung out, or like if I did some stuff outside barefoot, because Western Kentucky, right? Um, I felt more grounded, and I didn't understand that was a thing called grounding. You didn't understand, but you knew it already. Everything that
Right.
I think everything that we're learning, we probably knew from the get, but for whatever reason, it was taught out of us or kind of poo-pooed out of us, like, oh, that's silly. Um, and it's interesting. I think the further we go, which I mean, if you see people age and so, whatever, they become more childlike. A lot of times it's, if you're lucky enough to have had your grandparents around, they're probably the ones that will tell you stories about dragons and all these different creatures that lived in the woods and all these different folk tales and different, properties of iron and things like that. Um,
Oh yeah.
it's always there. As much as they want to talk like we're, you know, Star Trek: The Next Generation or whatever, we're still very basic, and basic's not a bad thing. I know the term basic, people use it nowadays as something really negative, but you know, um, that's what we are.
It's true.
We're spiritual creatures. We're creatures of magic, and uh, you know, as much as people want to deny it, which why would you? You know, if you have the ability to gather different abilities, I mean, like your missus was saying, my personal thing is, and not just because I love pasta, but I've got a very strong gut. In regards, if I think that started before I went into corrections, but especially once I worked in corrections, I had a really good, I don't know what you'd call it. I wouldn't call it a spidey sense necessarily or a sixth sense, but generally if something didn't feel right, it would almost have a smell to it. This sounds so dopey, but I was like, yeah, something just don't smell right. It just doesn't smell. This whole situation, like there's always the old expression, something stinking in Denmark or something like that. It's kind
Right.
of one of those deals. For whatever reason, I would have almost auditory, or what do you call it? Smell based signs and tells. I don't know where it come from. I never tried to develop it. It just was. Um, beyond some of the things that you were talking about, I noticed in one of your pictures you had this thing that showed your hand, and it had like a really strange kind of aura plasmic, I would almost say ectoplasmic vibe to it. Was that something? Was that something manifesting, or was that you
it
absorbing something, expelling something? What the hell was that?
I actually plucked that little guy off the wall of the place that we were investigating. I was getting my ghost hunting certs through Miss Patty Starr, and we were in the building doing a like this in-house ghost hunt, and they were asking me if I wanted to use any of the equipment. Well, I'm visually impaired, so I really couldn't see any of it anyway, and unless it was like a K2 meter, which uses lights. But even then, it wasn't really necessary. And the other problem is that I would actually trip it off. So I'm like, no, that's okay. Let other people use it. I'll just kind of mess around. And I break off from the group because I hear it. I hear a little bit of chatter. And I'm like, okay, I'll go check it out. It's nothing dangerous. Pop in, and it's a spirit fox. And I'm looking at the little guy, and he's just kind of clinging to the wall. And I scruff him and set him in my hand. About that time, people came in, and they were like, this room feels heavy. It feels weird. It's cold. And I'm like, well, it's okay. And I'm holding my hand perfectly still in that picture. Um, it's interesting because I'm not moving at all. I didn't even know that they were actually taking those pictures until a month after this thing was over. And they're like, "What's going on?" They start taking pictures, and of course, wow, this and this and this, and I'm trying to keep the little guy calm, and it's just kind of cool. Spirit foxes are everywhere. They're just manifestations born from natural energy, and they're about the size of a squirrel or so, at least as far as body. And the tail is huge. It's really, really long. So for stability, they wrap their tail around your arm, and that's why you see that kind of weird movement around my hand. Um, it had wrapped its tail around so that it had stability. But looking at the picture, if you look at it closely, you'll see two white dots in the very center of the mass, and that's its eyes. And then you'll actually see the ears come off of either side of what would be its head.
See,
And
oh, go ahead.
it they're friendly little guys. They're just great.
Well, see, that's what I was going to ask, because it's the first thing I saw is that I've not done a whole lot in regards of astral projection. Quite a bit of I don't know what you would call it, dream travel, maybe that was astral projection, but a lot of kind of out in the ether. I'm using the term literally. You can spell it with an E or an AE, however you want to, but would see things almost like spirit salamanders and different type of small creatures like that. Mainly what I saw was reptilian things like that, and I'm not sure why, but that's what I thought of, and I was like, he must have. I wonder if he had got either where he went into something astral, and it either attached or it attracted him, or that attracted to him. So I was just kind of curious. I was just curious about it.
Oh yeah, and stuff like that is everywhere. I mean, you do have things like spiritual salamanders. If you subscribe to the idea of elementals,
Yeah, I do.
the elemental of fire is actually salamander, um, and he is a actual salamander. He's just huge. But you have different things like that. And spiritual animals, a lot of people call them spirit beasts or lower realm guides, depending on where they are and who you're talking to. But they're actually abundant. I mean, everywhere. especially in places where natural energy is pooling. So places where there's a lot of water, places where there's a lot of greenery, places, where there's free airflow. You're going to find a lot of these little guys.
Well, the thing is, again, the more we push away from the natural, a couple things have happened. I think some things have just faded away and disconnected from us and whatever, but I think some things are still there because maybe they're here to monitor us. I mean, who knows exactly? But let me ask you, in the next minute or so, because we're right at the end of the show, is there anything you'd like to say to the folks out there listening, or advice, anything like that?
Say it one more time, Bub. You kind of broke up.
Sorry, I was just saying, in the last minute that we've got, as the show is drawing to an end, is there anything you'd like to say, shout-outs, anything like that?
When it comes to metaphysics and anything, the big thing to understand is that it's a skill set. You are who you are. You believe what you believe. If you're learning magic, it's a skill set. If you're learning alchemy, it's a skill set. It doesn't define you. It's something that allows you to, inspire and work with and understand others. It's the way that you actually show your faith, your spiritual grounding. So don't worry about labels. Don't worry about what people think or say. Be you. And the other thing is a shameless plug. If you guys want, you can come by and check us out on Facebook, Spirit Mechanix, spelled with an X, and we do live streams twice a week and tarot cards, once a week, and all kinds of different stuff. You can come out and see us if you guys are local. We've always got our events up and everything. But
always be on the lookout for a supisode. Those are always really fun.
Yeah, we do supisodes, which are random live streams. We kind of pop in and do them. But when we do those, they never get saved. The reason why is, one, we kind of go a little bit everywhere, but two, anything that is discussed is an open discussion. And that means anything as far as spirituality, metaphysics, practice, different things like that. Typically on the other two live streams, we're very careful because, those get saved. We're very careful about what we answer and how we answer. But the supisodes are literally no holds barred. You ask the question, you get the straight answer.
Great. Well, listen.
But,
listen, I was going to say I'm going to go ahead and do my outro, and if you guys will stick around in just 1 minute, I'll talk to you off the air in just 1 second. And thank you for coming on.
Sure.
And there it is, folks. Spirit Mechanix. Interesting folks. I plan on having those guys back soon. But I want you guys to make sure to enjoy your day. Go out there and drink deep of the well of joy and happiness and learning. But as the sun sets and the shadows grow long, make sure to check under your bed, in your closet, down your back hallway. You never know. You might have a spirit salamander down there, or God knows what. But it's okay. Don't be afraid, because sometimes in fear there is learning. So until next time, everybody, love yourselves and love each other. And we will see you again soon here on the House of Asher. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.